I started my investigation with a visit to a man who's done his fair share of research into the subject. Ghost ship aficionado, writer and journalist, Nils Ling.
I think phantom ships have a romantic aspect to it. Most of us are drawn to the old sea stories anyway, and the sea has always had this air of mystery. The phantom ship is, there's this collective myth, this idea that a whole crew of people with all the passengers on board could be lost.
Well, just how prevalent are these phantom ship sightings?
There are phantom ship sightings from almost every country. There's a phantom ship off of Chile. There's one off of Sao Paulo, Brazil. They're worldwide. Of course, the Flying Dutchman around the Cape of Good Hope is one that's very well known. The Mary Celeste was just a ship that was found completely unpeopled in the middle of the ocean.
The story of the Mary Celeste is perhaps one of the most compelling nautical mysteries of all time. The ill-fated schooner was popularized in a fanciful tale written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Despite her grand reputation, the Mary Celeste wasn't actually a typical ghost ship. Storyteller Andrew Allenbeck of the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic explains.
Ghost ships is also used to describe any abandoned ship, such as, most famously, possibly most famously in all the world, the Mary Celeste. She was a little brigantine built here in Nova Scotia. Sailing off into the North Atlantic with a huge cargo of mostly alcohol at the time in the middle of the 1800s, she was met by another vessel from here which was returning from Europe on her way home, the Dei Gratia. Imagine yourself seeing a ship from home sailing towards you across the North Atlantic, probably a captain that you're socially familiar with, and yet seeing that she's not sailing properly. It's listing a little bit too much. Nobody seems to be taking care of the sails or the tiller. And as you get closer, you realize that's entirely the case. There's nobody on deck at all. When you get very close, what do? But, well, send some of the crew across to see if something's wrong. And when they find nobody aboard at all, and bare scraps of clues as to where everybody went. And so every year you will find some book or some film coming out somewhere talking about the grand unsolved mystery of the Mary Celeste.
The Mary Celeste is just a small part of Nova Scotia's long and colorful nautical history. To find out more about the province's ghost ship sightings, I went to see folklore researcher Clary Croft. What is one of the most popular phantom ship stories in the Maritimes?
The most famous phantom ship in Nova Scotia, and perhaps the most famous phantom ship in Canada, is the Young Teaser. During the War of 1812, there was a number of privateers, which are legalized pirates. They had a letter of marque from the government giving them the right to board enemy ships. They were coming up and perusing the coast, and we were doing the same thing with the American coast. And this vessel, the Young Teaser, was trapped in the St. Margaret's Bay area by a British man-of-war. And in order not to be captured, the captain went down below and blew the vessel up. And it went up in a ball of flames. A true story. I mean, that's not, there's nothing paranormal about that, except that very shortly afterwards, and up until this day, probably every summer, there are people with multi-million-dollar yachts or rowboats that experience seeing the Young Teaser in St. Margaret's Bay.
Matthew Mitchell is an 88-year-old sea captain. Many years ago, as he was sailing out of Lunenburg aboard the Cape North, he was called on deck to investigate a mysterious ship that approached out of nowhere.
She was all lit up. Like everything was lit up aboard of her. You just could see the shape of the ship, but the sails, everything, the way the sails was on, there was all lights, but it was like a burning light, like a flare. And all of a sudden she started to disappear, the lights, and they went out right from the top of the spar, right to the water. And she was gone. The next morning, I had a gentleman with me. He was a lot older than I was at that time. And when we were down to the table eating, I was telling them the yarn about it, what happened through the night, because there was only 3 of us, 4 of us on watch. And he said, look, he said, you should have called me. I said, why? Then he said, that was the teaser. He said, I seen her many times in my time. He said, if you ever see it again, he said, be sure and let me know. So sure enough, it's about a year later. And all of a sudden, the same thing happened, and in about the same place. And they called me, and I came out, and here was this ship lit up. And the first thing I thought about was this man. I told him to call him, and they went down calling. Of course, the whole crew was down below, came up, and when they came up, I stopped the ship and and put the lights out. And all of a sudden, it started to disappear again. The same thing happened. But this man, he told me that he's seen it many times, and he said that's what it was, the teaser.
While some phantom ships, like the teaser, appear as mysterious lights, other haunted craft sightings can be much more elaborate. The shores of New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island are famous for their sightings of ghostly vessels. Nils Ling collects stories about the phenomena in the Northumberland Strait. He offered me some insight into the peculiar nature of these sightings.
The phantom ship stories are remarkably similar. They all involve a three-masted schooner or brigantine, which is not a typical Hollywood type of ship, but they all involve a three-masted schooner. It's always on fire. Often there are people on board that can be seen fighting the fire or dealing with the fire in some way or crawling up the rigging. The ship is seen for quite a period of time and then slowly disappears. Sometimes it just drops down into the water, and sometimes it just fades away into a fog bank or somewhere else.
What's so special about the phantom ships of the Northumberland Strait?
The phantom ships of the Northumberland Strait are seen by entire communities. The phantom ship in the Baie de Chaleur has been seen. I mean, everybody in Caracat, New Brunswick can tell you a phantom ship story because they've personally witnessed it. So more people see it. Along the shores of Prince Edward Island, entire car ferries, the Prince Nova was once coming across from Nova Scotia to Prince Edward Island, and actually diverted to go and help a ship that was on fire and in distress. And when they got there, of course, there was no ship, and it was a mystery.
The Bay of Chaleur in New Brunswick's North Shore reports one of the highest numbers of phantom ship sightings in the world. Here, for over 200 years, residents have seen an elusive full-rigged vessel engulfed in flames. Margaret Daigle's Bathurst home overlooks the water, a perfect vantage point for witnessing spectacular ghostly phenomena. So, Margaret, I understand you actually saw the phantom ship more than once?
The last time I seen it, it was on Halloween night, around 6 o'clock. We were going on a card game. I had my lady friends with me in the car. They all got out of the car yelling, "Look at the phantom ship and look at the phantom ship." So we all got out of the car. We all looked at it. We all seen the same thing. My sister-in-law went in the house to get a camera to take a picture of it. By the time she came out with the camera, it was gone. It was sunk.
Can you describe for me exactly what you saw?
Yes. I seen the whole boat, one end from the other, all burning from the bottom to the top. And I could see the ladder all on fire. I could see a man all on fire, him too. His head, his hands were stretched out. I could see the whole man, his legs, his hands, and everything falling from the top of the ladder. And he fell right down in the burning boat.
Janine Lemarec was with Margaret that October evening and was mesmerized by what she saw.
Right away, I knew it was the phantom ship. Like, you just can't keep your eyes off of it. And I mean, those ships from maybe the year 1700 don't exist today. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. Like, it's something that I'm still hoping to see it again, but I probably never will. I was just, I guess it was just a privilege. I would have to say it's around Cairn Point.
Okay.
Like from here. I had never believed that the people that saw it before, and now I really believe that the phantom ship does exist.